Second 0, diving, rolling under him. He can't stay with me. Taking another shot.
His shoulder wedged against the boom structure. The metal edge cut into his skin each time he reached deeper, but he ignored it. He held the flashlight in his teeth now, its beam shaking with every breath. Sweat dripped from his forehead and splashed onto the aluminum skin of the aircraft, leaving dark spots that evaporated in seconds. The tropical heat pressed down on him like a blanket. He looped the Z-shaped wire around the control cable, feeding it through the tiny opening between two pulleys. The cable resisted at first, like it didn't want to accept anything new. McKenna pulled harder until the metal seat snapped into place with a soft metallic click. The cable twanged, tighter now, vibrating under his fingers like a string on a guitar. No slack, no delay, perfect tension. He wiped his hands on his coveralls, leaving streaks of oil and blood. No one would notice. No one would ask. The inspection panel slid back into place with a hollow metallic snap. He tightened the screws, making sure the seam looked untouched. Regulation perfect, officially approved, completely illegal. He stepped back from the aircraft, hands on his hips, staring at the P-38 like it was a sleeping animal. For the first time in months, he felt hope. Not confidence, just a small spark of hope. The kind that came when you finally did something, anything, to fight back. It was nearly 3 a.m. when he walked back toward the barracks. The base was quiet except for the distant buzz of insects and the faint rumble of engines being tested by the night shift crew. He didn't sleep. He lay on his bunk staring at the metal ceiling, listening to the muffled snores of exhausted mechanics. His mind replayed every death, every radio call, every scream he had heard in the past 2 months. He thought of Hayes, the way the kid had looked at him with fear hidden behind forced determination. He thought of Parker's last words, the crackle of the radio, the burst of gunfire, the silence. If this modification didn't work, Hayes would be next. Dawn broke with a faint glow that seeped into the barracks. McKenna was already up, already walking toward the flight line. The morning airfield smelled of fuel, oil, wet grass, and something else. Something heavy, the weight of another day that could end in fire. Hayes walked toward his P-38 with slow steps, helmet under his arm, parachute slung over one shoulder. He looked at McKenna and tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How's she feeling today?" Hayes asked. McKenna swallowed. He kept his voice steady. "She's tight. She'll respond faster." Hayes nodded, though he didn't understand what had changed. He didn't ask. Maybe he didn't want to know. Pilots knew when things weren't exactly by the book, and sometimes not knowing was safer. The roar of engines filled the air as the P-38s warmed up. Twin Allison engines hummed with a low growl that vibrated the ground beneath their boots. The vibration McKenna had felt thousands of times before, but this time felt different. This time felt like the edge of something. Hayes climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, put on his helmet, and gave McKenna a thumbs up through the canopy. McKenna tapped the fuselage twice, the same ritual he had done with every pilot he had ever sent into the sky. A silent prayer, a silent apology. The P-38 rolled onto the runway. The propellers thrust up clouds of dust. The engines howled. McKenna watched the wheels lift off the ground, watched the aircraft rise into the orange dawn, watched it climb toward a sky filled with clouds and danger. He stayed standing there long after the fighter disappeared. His hands were shaking. He didn't know if he had saved Hayes or killed him. The radio crackled to life in the operation shack minutes later. Enemy fighters spotted, engagement imminent. 8 Zeros, 12 Lightning fighters. The fight would happen fast. It always did. McKenna walked into the shack slowly. He didn't want to hear what was coming, but he had to. His heart hammered against his ribs. He leaned against the wall as the first transmission came through. "Contact! Contact! They're diving on us from the right!" Panic. Chaos. McKenna closed his eyes. Another voice came through, not Hayes, someone else. "They're turning inside us! Brake left! Brake left!" Then a voice he recognized. Hayes. "On my 6, rolling right!" McKenna's breath stopped. He leaned closer to the radio, hands trembling. Hayes again. "Wait! He's not gaining! Rolling again! He overshot! He overshot!" The operators froze. That didn't happen. A Zero didn't overshoot a P-38. Not at low speed, not in a turn. Then, "I'm inside his turn, taking the shot!" There was a burst of static, then the clean, sharp crack of gunfire over the radio. "Splash 1! I got him! I got him!" The operations shack erupted with shouts. Mechanics and ground crew slammed hands against tables, against each other's shoulders. Someone yelled, "No damn way!" Another shouted Hayes' name. McKenna didn't speak. His eyes burned. His throat tightened. Hayes wasn't done.
Second Zero, diving, rolling under him. "He can't stay with me. Taking another shot." More gunfire. "He's hit! He's burning! Splash 2!" 2 kills in under 90 seconds. McKenna stepped back from the radio, his vision blurring. His heartbeat slowed, replaced with something heavier, something deeper. The weight of truth. The modification worked. It hadn't just helped, it had transformed the airplane. That tiny piece of piano wire, 6 inches long, illegal, unauthorized, unnoticed, had changed everything. On the radio, Hayes' breathing was heavy but controlled. "Tell the ground crew, tell McKenna, whatever he did, it saved my life." McKenna didn't move. Couldn't move. His legs felt weak. His hands shook uncontrollably. He looked out toward the southern sky, where the fight was still happening. He whispered, barely audible, "Come home, kid. Just come home."
15 minutes later, the first P-38s appeared as glints of metal on the horizon. One by one, they descended toward the runway. Engines sputtering, paint scorched by gunfire, but flying. Hayes landed third. His left engine smoked lightly. His right boom had holes in it, but he was alive. Alive. The canopy opened. Hayes climbed down, shaking, sweating, eyes wide like he had seen death, and punched through it. He ran straight to McKenna. "What did you do?" Hayes asked, breathless. "The plane, it turned like it was reading my mind." McKenna didn't answer. Hayes didn't wait. "You saved me! You saved all of us!" Behind Hayes, pilots staggered out of their aircraft, exhausted but stunned. 3 kills, 4 damaged Zeros fled, and no lightning lost. 0 losses. For the first time in months. McKenna looked at Hayes, then at the P-38, then at the sky where men lived or died based on fractions of seconds. He knew the war had just changed, and he knew this was only the beginning. Word spread across the Pacific like wildfire, first among pilots, then mechanics, then squadron commanders. No one had seen P-38s maneuver like that before. Not at low airspeeds, not in tight turns, not against Zeros. A rumor began to form. A whisper passed between mess halls, maintenance bays, briefing tents. Someone on the ground had figured it out, but nobody knew what it was. Some said the engines had been secretly upgraded. Others claimed the flight controls had been reinforced with a new alloy shipped from the mainland. The pilot started calling Hayes' aircraft the Dancer because it moved as if gravity had forgotten it. Only McKenna knew the truth, and every time someone tried to corner him with a question, he pushed past them with a toolbox in hand, his eyes fixed on the ground. He didn't lie. He didn't explain. He just hid behind the one thing he understood: work. But secrets on a military base had a short life.
3 days after the battle, Captain Rourke summoned him to the command tent. McKenna entered slowly, cap in hand, unsure whether he was about to be promoted or court-martialed. Rourke stood behind a table covered in maps, casualty reports, and aircraft diagrams. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked tired, exhausted, maybe even curious. "McKenna," Rourke said, tapping the table. "Sit." McKenna stayed standing. Rourke sighed, motioning to a stool. "That wasn't a suggestion." McKenna sat. Rourke folded his arms. "I've been in this war long enough to know a miracle when I see one. Hayes should have been dead. So should 3 more of my pilots. But they're not. And you were the last man under that airplane." McKenna kept his eyes on the dirt floor. Rourke tilted his head. "Did you do something to that aircraft?" McKenna opened his mouth, then stopped. He felt sweat forming at the base of his neck. If he told the truth, he could be court-martialed, or worse, grounded permanently. He couldn't live with that, not if it meant watching more men die because he stayed silent. But he didn't get the chance to answer. Rourke leaned forward, voice low. "Relax. I'm not asking as your commanding officer. I'm asking as someone who buried 6 pilots in the last month." Silence. McKenna finally lifted his eyes and met Rourke's. "I stiffened the control cables. Used a Z-wire to remove the lag during high G turns. It makes the controls bite harder. Makes the plane move faster." Rourke stared at him for a long moment. Then he let out a breath he'd been holding for days. "Does it compromise the aircraft?" "No, sir." "Does it break regulation?" "Yes, sir." "Does it work?" McKenna nodded. "It's the difference between being hunted and fighting back." Rourke sat down slowly, elbows on the table, rubbing his temples like he'd just received the hardest truth in the world. "You could get in a lot of trouble for this," Rourke murmured. "I know." Rourke didn't look up. "And if I let this continue, so could I." McKenna swallowed. "I'll stop. Just say the word." Rourke finally looked at him, looked through him. "You are not stopping anything." McKenna blinked. "Sir?" "From this moment forward," Rourke said, standing, "every lightning in this squadron gets that modification. Quietly, efficiently, immediately." McKenna felt his chest tighten. "Sir, if the inspectors..." "We're at war," Rourke snapped. "But not in anger, more like desperation. I don't give a damn what the paperwork says. Saving my men matters more than pleasing someone behind a desk in California." He walked around the table and placed a firm hand on McKenna's shoulder. "You found an answer. Don't hide it. Use it." It was the first time McKenna felt something he hadn't since the war began.
Purpose. Not orders, not duty, purpose. Within hours, McKenna gathered the night crew. They met behind Hangar 3 under dim lantern light. The air smelled of hot metal and spilled fuel. Mechanics, wrench hands, grease faces, men who barely slept and kept the war machine alive while everyone else fought. When McKenna explained the modification, the men stared at him with disbelief. "They'll court-martial us," someone muttered. McKenna nodded. "Probably." Another mechanic stepped forward. "But if we don't do this, those kids keep dying." McKenna nodded again. The man rolled up his sleeves. "Then we start now." And that was it. No speech, no orders, just a choice. And they all made it. Within 2 days, 13 aircraft received the modification. The pilots felt it instantly. They described the controls as sharp, twitchy, alive. A few were nervous, most were thrilled. All were grateful. Then came the day that proved everything. A formation of Zeros, 21 fighters descended on the American patrol near the northern edge of the island chain. It should have been a slaughter. Outnumbered nearly 2-1, low altitude, surprise attack. But the Lightning Squadron moved differently now. They didn't flee, they didn't break formation in panic, they turned. McKenna stood beside the radio operator, listening in horror and awe as the fight unfolded in real time. Hayes' voice came first. "They can't stay inside my turn! Braking right! He overshot again!" Then Lieutenant Carson, breathless. "This is insane! I'm on one! He can't shake me! Firing!" Another burst of static, another kill called out. Then a third pilot laughed, a hysterical, disbelieving laugh during combat. "Feels like the plane's doing half the work for me." McKenna closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. He had done this. He had turned the tide of a battle thousands of miles across the ocean, armed with nothing more than a piano wire and a refusal to accept another death. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The results came in slowly, each one sounding unreal. 9 enemy aircraft down, 0 losses. 0. When the pilots landed, they didn't cheer, they didn't celebrate. Many simply got out of their cockpits and sat on the ground, overwhelmed. Carson walked straight to McKenna and hugged him. "You saved all of us," he whispered. McKenna didn't say anything, couldn't. His throat closed, and for the first time in years, tears burned behind his eyes. But victory brought attention, and attention brought danger. 2 days after the second battle, a transport plane landed at the airfield. Out stepped 2 men in crisp uniforms with notebooks, straight backs, and eyes that scanned everything with cold precision. Inspectors. Sent from the mainland. Sent because someone, somewhere, noticed that a squadron with a terrible record had suddenly become unstoppable. Sent because someone had questions. McKenna watched them walk toward the command tent, and he knew, in that moment, that the truth would come for him. The question was, would it destroy him or reveal something even greater?
But the real truth of that moment didn't reveal itself in the roar of the factory or the flash of twisted metal. It revealed itself in the silence afterward, the kind of silence where a man hears everything he never heard before, the tremble of his own breath, the weight of decisions he delayed, and the echo of someone's voice he wished he had listened to earlier. He stood there, shoulders still stinging, sweat freezing on his back as the machine finally powered down. The boom structure lay crooked, like a stubborn reminder that life can tilt without warning, and the people around him watched with wide eyes, because they understood it could have been worse, much worse. He didn't speak, not immediately. Words felt too small for a moment that big. Instead, he lifted the beam a little, almost testing himself, maybe testing fate. The supervisors rushed to help, but he shook his head softly. Not because he wanted to be a hero, he hated that word, but because letting go too quickly felt like admitting he had lost control. And in that short, trembling moment, he realized something that would stay with him forever. Time was not guaranteed. It was a fragile thread, and it could snap even while you thought you were strong enough, skilled enough, or young enough to outrun it. He stepped away from the damaged structure and exhaled, a slow release of tension that felt like it had been building for years. When he finally walked outside, the afternoon sun was waiting, soft and quiet, as if the world had paused just to give him room to breathe. Dust floated in the air like small suspended memories, catching the light, and he watched them as if they were tiny reminders of everything he had been ignoring. All the late-night thoughts,
all the hidden fears, all the unspoken dreams that he kept pushing into tomorrow. He sat on a wooden crate behind the building. The world smelled like metal, smoke, and warm earth. He didn't know if 2 minutes passed or 20. Time lost its blame and became gentle. He picked up a small pebble from the ground and rolled it in his hand. It was smooth, shaped by years of being pushed, pressured, and polished. And suddenly, he felt something strike his heart, a thought so clear it felt like someone whispered it directly into his ear. This is you. Worn, pressured, but becoming something. He closed his eyes, letting that whisper settle inside him. Life wasn't trying to break him. It was shaping him. All the hardship, all the mistakes, all the bruises, they were reminders, not punishments. Reminders that growth hurts before it becomes beautiful. Reminders that you cannot hold on to everything. Reminders that time moves with or without your permission. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from it and start listening to it. When he returned home that evening, the sky was painted with long strokes of orange and soft purple. The air felt lighter than the morning air, almost forgiving. He walked through the door, expecting to feel exhausted, but instead there was a strange calmness in him, a clarity he didn't ask for but desperately needed. He washed his hands, watching the water slide off his fingers, carrying grease, dust, and the weight of the day with it. And as he dried them, he looked at his reflection in the small mirror hanging crooked above the sink.
He saw a man who had survived something bigger than machinery. He saw a man who had been forced to pause, forced to realize that he had been moving so fast he forgot to notice himself. He touched his shoulder gently. The pain was dull but steady, a reminder he would carry for a while. But instead of resenting it, he found himself grateful, because sometimes life needed to shake you just enough to wake you. Sometimes a scar wasn't a flaw, it was a signature of what you had overcome. Later that night, he stepped outside again. The village was quiet, the lights dim, the sound of distant radios blending with the soft hum of nighttime insects. He lifted his eyes to the sky. Stars scattered everywhere, countless and small, each one a tiny spark of time that had traveled across eternity to be visible right now. He stood there, letting the cold air brush his face, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel rushed. He didn't feel behind. He didn't feel lost. He felt present. And in that presence, something in him began to change, slowly, quietly, like early dawn stretching into the horizon. He realized he wanted more than survival. He wanted purpose. He wanted meaning in the moments between waking and sleeping. He wanted to build something he would be proud of, something lasting, something honest, something that would still whisper his name long after he was gone. The next morning, he woke with a clear mind. Not because everything was suddenly easy, but because he understood the truth. Time is not an enemy. It is a companion that walks beside you with a hand on your shoulder, reminding you to keep going, reminding you not to waste the seconds that can never return. He packed his lunch, tied his shoes, and opened the door to the morning light with a different kind of resolve. Not the stubborn toughness he used to carry, but a quieter strength. The kind that grows after a person finally listens to what life has been trying to say. And so, he went back to work. But the building felt different. The noise felt different. Even the air felt different. Because he was different. He moved slower, not out of fear, but out of awareness. He examined the machines with a fresh respect. He greeted the workers with sincerity.
And when he passed the spot where the boom structure had twisted and nearly collapsed on him, he stopped for a moment. He looked at it without anger or frustration. He looked at it with understanding.
That moment had been a turning point, a quiet invitation to rethink everything: priorities, habits, dreams, and faith. A reminder that life was not measured in years, money, or accomplishments, but in awareness. Awareness of what you choose to fight for. Awareness of what you choose to ignore. Awareness of who you become when no one is watching. Days passed. Weeks followed. But instead of fading, the experience grew more meaningful. He started seeing the world differently, not as a race, but as a journey, not as a competition, but as a test of patience, gratitude, and courage. He began noticing small things: the warmth of morning tea, the softness of worn-out gloves, the kindness in a coworker's joke, the beauty in dust particles dancing in a ray of light. He started writing his thoughts in a small notebook, quietly filling pages with hopes, lessons, and prayers. Sometimes he wondered why life had chosen that exact moment to wake him. Why that specific day, that specific shift, that specific structure. But he stopped asking why. He realized the better question was, what now? What will he do with the time he still has? What memories will he build? What dreams will he chase? What moments will he honor? He didn't have all the answers, and that was okay. What mattered was that he had started asking the right questions. And so the story doesn't end with the crash of metal or the sting of pain. It ends with a man standing in the gentle wind of a new morning, knowing that time speaks in whispers. Whispers that guide, warn, comfort, and remind. Whispers that say, slow down. Look around, grow, believe, live. And if you listen closely enough, you'll hear them too, in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in the soft glow of sunrise, in the fading footsteps of yesterday, in the breath you're taking right now. Because time is always speaking. The question is whether we choose to hear it.